What if I told you that in just 45 minutes, you'll witness a betrayal so profound it shattered a family, and a revenge so meticulously planned it left everyone speechless? This isn't just a story about a party, it's about the raw, burning resentment that simmered beneath years of smiles, erupting into a moment of undeniable, heartbreaking truth. My name is Sarah, and for decades I believed in the unbreakable bond of family. I believed in the fairy tale my parents painted for us, a picture of unconditional love and unwavering support. We celebrated every milestone, every holiday, every anniversary with a devotion that felt almost sacred. Yet, beneath that polished surface, a bitter truth festered, one that would ultimately consume me and force me to confront the very people I loved most. For as long as I can remember, I was the dutiful daughter, the one who always stepped up, always made sure everything was perfect. My older sister, Emily, was the golden child, effortlessly charming, always praised, while I was the reliable one, the steady anchor. I didn't resent her for it, not then. I just accepted my role. My parents, John and Mary, were pillars of our community, respected, admired, and seemingly devoted to each other. Their 50th wedding anniversary was approaching, a monumental occasion, and I wanted to make it unforgettable. I envisioned a grand celebration, a testament to their enduring love, a day they would cherish forever. I poured my heart, soul, and a significant portion of my savings into planning every single detail. I'm talking about an extravagant affair, a ballroom at the historic Biltmore Hotel, a live band playing their favorite Motown hits, a custom-designed cake, and a guest list that included every friend and relative they'd ever mentioned. The final bill for this dream celebration? A staggering $18,500. I paid it all, every single cent. I didn't hesitate. This was for my parents, for their legacy, for the love I genuinely believed we all shared. I kept it a secret, wanting to surprise them, wanting to see their faces light up with pure joy. The day of the party arrived, a crisp autumn evening in Atlanta. The ballroom shimmered, the music swelled, and my parents, looking elegant and radiant, were overwhelmed with emotion. They embraced me, tears in their eyes, thanking me profusely for such a magnificent gesture. My heart swelled with a happiness I hadn't felt in years. This was it, I thought. This was my moment, my contribution, my way of showing them how much they meant to me. But then, as the evening progressed, a subtle shift occurred. Little comments, whispered glances, an undercurrent of something unsettling. My aunt, usually so boisterous, became unusually quiet, her eyes darting between me and Emily. My cousin, who always had a knack for blurting out inconvenient truths, started a sentence with, "It was so generous of Emily to," and then abruptly stopped, catching my mother's furious glare. A cold knot began to form in my stomach. What was happening? The truth, when it finally hit me, didn't come as a sudden explosion, but as a slow, agonizing burn. It started with a seemingly innocent toast from my father, raising his glass and proclaiming, "We are so incredibly grateful to our wonderful daughter Emily for making all of this possible." My head snapped towards Emily, who offered a small, almost imperceptible smirk. My mother quickly chimed in, "Yes, Emily worked tirelessly on every detail, didn't you, dear?" The room erupted in applause, directed solely at my sister. My heart hammered against my ribs, my vision blurred. It felt like I'd been punched in the gut, then again, and again, each blow stealing a piece of my breath. I stood there, invisible, the architect of this grand celebration, watching as my sister basked in the glory, accepting accolades for my hard work, my money, my love. The resentment, dormant for so long, flared into an inferno. This wasn't just about a party anymore. It was about a lifetime of being overlooked, of my contributions being dismissed, of my very existence being overshadowed. The betrayal wasn't just from Emily. It was from my parents, who stood by, allowing this cruel deception to unfold, actively participating in it. That night, something inside me broke. The girl who always sought approval, who craved their affection, vanished. In her place emerged a woman consumed by a singular, unyielding purpose: justice. I wanted them to know the truth, not just the truth about the party, but the truth about how deeply their favoritism had wounded me. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the pain they had so carelessly inflicted. And I knew, with chilling certainty, that I wouldn't rest until they discovered who really paid for that party, and what it cost me to make it happen. What happened next would change our family forever, revealing secrets far darker than anyone could have imagined. My name is Amelia, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been a carefully constructed performance. Not a performance I chose, mind you, but one thrust upon me by the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My parents, Robert and Eleanor. Their expectations were a suffocating blanket, smothering every spark of my own ambition, every dream that didn't align with their meticulously crafted image of a perfect daughter. From the moment I could walk, their obsession with appearances was palpable. Good grades weren't enough, they had to be the best. My piano recitals weren't for my enjoyment, they were for the admiring whispers of their friends. Every achievement, every milestone, felt less like a personal triumph, and more like another brick in the monument they were building to their own perceived success. I was their trophy, polished and displayed for the world to see, while inside I was crumbling. This feeling of being an accessory, rather than a cherished individual, festered in me. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but a slow, insidious poison that seeped into every corner of my being. I watched them lavish attention on my older brother Michael, whose rebellious streak was somehow endearing to them, a charming eccentricity. But for Amelia, the rule follower, the good girl, there was only a relentless pressure to conform. My accomplishments were expected, his were celebrated. This subtle, yet constant disparity fueled a quiet resentment that simmered beneath my placid exterior. Then came the conversation that truly set the stage for everything that followed. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the scent of burning leaves hung heavy in the air. We were at dinner, a rare family affair where I wasn't being quizzed about my academic performance or my future career prospects. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, were animated, discussing their upcoming 30th wedding anniversary. "It has to be spectacular," Eleanor declared, her eyes sparkling. "Something truly unforgettable, a testament to our enduring love, our success." Robert nodded in agreement, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "Only the best for us, darling. No expense spared." They began to list off ideas: a grand ballroom, a live orchestra, a guest list that read like a who's who of their social circle. The numbers they casually tossed around made my stomach clench. Tens of thousands of dollars, all for a single night of ostentatious display. It wasn't about celebrating their love, it was about projecting an image. And then, the casual remark that felt like a punch to the gut. "Of course, Amelia, you'll be contributing," Robert said, not asking, but stating it as an indisputable fact. "You're doing so well at the firm, you can certainly afford to help make this truly special for your dear parents." My doing so well at the firm was a polite euphemism for the grueling, soul-crushing hours I poured into my job as a corporate lawyer, sacrificing my youth and my sanity to climb a ladder I wasn't even sure I wanted to be on. I was financially independent, yes, but it came at a steep cost. My meager savings, which I had painstakingly built for a down payment on a small apartment, suddenly felt like a piggy bank for my parents' extravagant whims. They didn't see my hard work, they saw a resource to be tapped. A bitter taste filled my mouth. I wanted to scream, to tell them that my money was my money, earned through my own sweat and tears, not theirs to commandeer for another one of their vanity projects. But the words caught in my throat. Years of conditioning, of being the good girl, kept me silent. Instead, I simply nodded, a forced smile plastered on my face. "Of course, Mom, Dad," I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. "Whatever you need." That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the resentment that had been simmering for years finally boiled over. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the complete disregard for my autonomy, my feelings, my very existence as an individual. They saw me as an extension of themselves, a prop in their grand narrative. The anniversary party, once a distant idea, transformed into a symbol of their control, their endless demands. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle in my chest. This wasn't just about contributing to a party anymore. This was about reclaiming my life. A dangerous thought began to form, a whisper of rebellion that grew louder with every passing moment. If they wanted a spectacular anniversary party, I would give them one. But it wouldn't be on their terms. It would be a party that, in its own way, would serve as a testament to my enduring resentment, to my simmering anger. This was my chance to finally break free from their suffocating grip, to show them that Amelia was not just a prop, but a force to be reckoned with. The cost of the party, the $18,500 they expected me to contribute, became less of a burden and more of an investment in my own twisted form of justice. The planning began that night, not for their celebration, but for my liberation. My mind raced, a whirlwind of possibilities unfurling before me. The initial shock of their audacious request had morphed into a cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about reclaiming my identity, about finally severing the invisible strings that had bound me to their narrative for so long. The $18,500 wasn't a contribution. It was a weapon, a meticulously crafted instrument of my impending liberation. I would give them their spectacular party, their grand celebration, but it would be a Trojan horse, filled with the very truth they so desperately avoided. The next morning, a subtle shift in my demeanor went unnoticed by Robert and Eleanor. I was still their dutiful daughter, but beneath the surface, a strategist was emerging. I began my research, not just into caterers and venues, but into the intricate web of their social circle, the people whose opinions they valued above all else. This wasn't just a party, it was a stage, and every guest would be an unwitting participant in my carefully orchestrated drama. I started with the guest list, a veritable who's who of their perceived elite. Each name was a potential audience member, a silent judge, and I intended to give them a show they wouldn't soon forget. I spent hours poring over details, feigning enthusiasm for floral arrangements and seating charts. Robert would occasionally chime in with a suggestion, usually something opulent and entirely unnecessary, which I would dutifully note, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. Eleanor, meanwhile, was in her element, basking in the glow of impending grandeur, completely oblivious to the undercurrents of my true intentions. Her constant demands, her insistence on perfection, only fueled my determination. Every snide remark about my lack of taste, or my uninspired suggestions, was a drop of gasoline on the fire I was meticulously stoking. The venue was the first major hurdle. They wanted the grand ballroom at the old Fairmont, a place synonymous with old money and lavish affairs. The cost was astronomical, even for a single evening. I nodded, feigned a slight hesitation, then agreed, my voice betraying none of the internal glee I felt. "It's your 30th after all," I'd said, a saccharine sweetness coating my words. "Only the best for you two." Robert beamed, oblivious to the double meaning. He saw a loving daughter. I saw a pawn in my game. Next came the catering. Eleanor insisted on the renowned chef Antoine, famous for his exorbitant prices and impeccable reputation. Again, I conceded, making a show of calculating the figures, sighing dramatically, then agreeing with a practiced air of reluctant sacrifice. "It's a lot," I'd murmured, "but I suppose it's worth it for such a milestone." Robert, ever the pragmatist when it came to my money, had briefly interjected with a suggestion for a more affordable option, but Eleanor's unwavering gaze had quickly silenced him. My plan was unfolding perfectly. Their greed, their vanity, their absolute certainty of my unwavering compliance were all working in my favor. The invitations were another crucial element. I designed them myself, a classic, elegant script, but with a subtle, almost imperceptible detail. On the back, in a barely visible font, I added a tiny, stylized symbol, a small, intricate key. It was my personal signature, a silent promise to myself that this event would unlock something profound. No one else would notice it, of course, but for me, it was a constant reminder of my purpose. I mailed them out, picturing the expressions of delight on the faces of their friends, all of whom would soon bear witness to a truth they never expected. My days became a blur of appointments, phone calls, and clandestine planning. I spent hours researching their past, digging up old articles, sifting through forgotten photographs. I wanted to understand the roots of their superficiality, the genesis of their relentless pursuit of external validation. The more I delved, the clearer it became. Their lives were a carefully curated facade, built on a foundation of appearances and expectations. They weren't just putting on a show for others, they were living a lie for themselves. And I, their dutiful daughter, was about to expose it all. The tension within me was a live wire, humming with anticipation. I was no longer the quiet, compliant Amelia. I was a force, a sculptor of destiny, meticulously crafting the narrative of their downfall. Every decision, every interaction, was a calculated move in my intricate game of chess. Robert and Eleanor, meanwhile, continued their oblivious dance, reveling in the impending spectacle, completely unaware that the stage they had so eagerly prepared was about to become their own undoing. The date of the anniversary party loomed closer, a beacon on the horizon, promising not just a celebration, but a reckoning. My liberation was within reach, and the cost, I realized, was a small price to pay for true freedom. The anniversary party planning became an all-consuming vortex, and my parents, Robert and Eleanor, dove headfirst into its swirling chaos. They treated it like a royal coronation, not a celebration of 30 years together. Eleanor, in particular, transformed into a benevolent dictator, micromanaging every minute detail, from the color of the napkins to the precise floral arrangements. She insisted on a specific shade of ivory for the tablecloths, a hue so obscure the event planner had to special order it from an artisan linen company in France. Robert, usually more grounded, became her enthusiastic enabler, nodding along to every extravagant suggestion, his eyes alight with the vision of the grand spectacle. I watched their elaborate preparations with a detached fascination, a silent observer in their self-made theater. They debated catering menus for hours, agonizing over whether to offer a pan-seared Chilean sea bass or a roasted rack of lamb as the main course. The guest list expanded exponentially, each edition representing another rung on their social ladder. They spoke of prominent judges, influential business owners, and society figures as if these people were personal friends, not mere acquaintances they hoped to impress. It was clear this party wasn't just about celebrating their love. It was a carefully curated exhibition of their perceived status. My brother Michael, bless his oblivious heart, even got roped into the charade. Eleanor tasked him with coordinating the musical entertainment, a jazz ensemble she'd heard at a charity gala. He grumbled good-naturedly, but ultimately complied, always eager to please, always seeking their approval in a way I had long since abandoned. He didn't see the undercurrent of desperation, the frantic need to project an image of effortless perfection. He just saw a party, a chance to have a good time and maybe catch up with some old family friends. His innocence, at times, felt like a stark contrast to my own simmering cynicism. One evening, Eleanor called me, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. "Amelia, darling, I found the most exquisite venue. The grand ballroom at the plaza. Can you believe it? It's simply divine, but the cost, well, it's rather astronomical." She paused, expecting me to gasp in sympathy, perhaps even offer to chip in. Instead, I remained silent, letting the awkward pause hang in the air. However, she continued, undeterred, "Robert and I decided it's worth every penny. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event, after all. We simply must have the best." I could almost hear her preening through the phone line, basking in the imagined glow of her own self-importance. The price tag for the plaza's grand ballroom alone was more than some people earned in a year. It was a sum that made my stomach clench, not out of concern for their finances, but out of a growing sense of perverse satisfaction. Each extravagant choice, each unnecessary expense, was another brick in the foundation of my meticulously planned retribution. They were digging their own hole, and I was merely providing the shovel. My liberation was not just within reach, it was being meticulously engineered, piece by agonizing piece. Then came the conversation about the anniversary gift. Robert and Eleanor, sitting across from me at their opulent dining table, announced their desire for something truly special, something memorable. Eleanor suggested a trip to the Italian Riviera, a romantic cruise through the Mediterranean. Robert chimed in with a wistful mention of a limited edition antique clock he'd seen in a gallery, a piece he'd been coveting for years. They spoke of these things not as suggestions, but as entitlements, their eyes gleaming with expectation. They had no idea that the greatest gift they would receive was the truth, delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. I nodded, feigning enthusiasm, offering vague assurances about finding something perfect. Inside, a cold, hard resolve solidified. Their insatiable desire for more, for better, for the grandest display, was precisely what I needed. It fed my purpose, fueling the fire that had been smoldering within me for decades. The resentment that had once been a quiet ember now roared, bright and hot, illuminating the path forward. The days bled into weeks, each one bringing the anniversary party closer. Eleanor's stress levels soared, her voice growing sharper, her demands more insistent. Robert, meanwhile, became increasingly detached, absorbed in his own world of golf and business deals, leaving Eleanor to handle the bulk of the planning. Their dynamic was a familiar one. Eleanor the demanding perfectionist, Robert the agreeable bystander, both completely consumed by the illusion they were constructing. I, on the other hand, was calm, almost serene. My actions were precise, deliberate. I made the necessary phone calls, transferred the funds, and confirmed the arrangements. The numbers on the invoices were staggering, each one a testament to their unchecked vanity. $18,500. It was a sum that would make most people balk, but for me, it was an investment. An investment in my freedom, in my peace, and in the long-awaited reckoning that was about to unfold. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the curtain was about to rise on a performance they would never forget. The day of the anniversary party arrived with an almost theatrical flourish, a perfect autumn afternoon painted in hues of gold and crimson. Every detail I had meticulously planned, every vendor I had carefully vetted, had culminated in this moment. The venue, a sprawling estate nestled in the rolling hills just outside the city, was breathtaking. Fairy lights twinkled in ancient oak trees, casting a magical glow over the meticulously manicured gardens. A string quartet played classical melodies, their notes drifting through the air like gossamer threads. This was not just a party, it was a stage, and I was its hidden director. I watched from a discreet distance as Robert and Eleanor, my parents, made their grand entrance. Eleanor, radiant in a sapphire gown, clutched Robert's arm, her smile wide and practiced for the cameras that flashed around them. Robert, ever the picture of dignified success, nodded graciously to the well-wishers, his chest puffed out with pride. They were in their element, soaking up the adulation, completely oblivious to the carefully laid trap I had sprung. The initial wave of guests, a who's who of their social circle, swarmed them, offering congratulations and fawning over the opulent setting. I saw Michael among them, a charming smile on his face, effortlessly blending into the scene. He even caught my eye across the crowded lawn, offering a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. He knew. The early hours of the party were a blur of champagne toasts and polite conversation, a facade of joyous celebration. I moved through the crowd like a phantom, observing, listening, a quiet observer in my own meticulously crafted drama. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, were basking in the glow of their perceived success, accepting compliments on their exquisite taste and generosity. Each compliment felt like a tiny pinprick, a confirmation of their self-absorption, fueling the fire that had long simmered within me. I overheard Eleanor gushing to a friend about how Robert had pulled out all the stops for their special day, a statement that made my blood run cold. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. As the evening progressed and the last rays of sunlight faded, plunging the estate into a soft ethereal twilight, it was time. The moment I had been waiting for, planning for what felt like a lifetime, was finally at hand. I had arranged for a small, intimate ceremony where Robert and Eleanor would renew their vows, a symbolic gesture that would precede the main event. The string quartet shifted to a more romantic piece, and guests gathered around a flower-adorned gazebo. Robert and Eleanor stood before a beaming officiant, their faces alight with an almost childlike joy. They exchanged loving glances, their hands clasped together, reciting vows they had written themselves. It was a picture of perfect marital bliss, a tableau of everything they wanted the world to believe. Then, as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife once more, a hush fell over the crowd. This was my cue. A large projector screen, previously hidden behind a tapestry, slowly descended, casting a bright rectangle of light onto the side of the grand mansion. The music faded, replaced by the soft hum of the projector. Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. Robert and Eleanor, still holding hands, turned, their smiles faltering as they saw the screen. Their eyes, once full of happiness, now held a flicker of apprehension. The first image flashed onto the screen, a scanned invoice. The amount, $18,500. The description, full payment for Robert and Eleanor's 30th anniversary celebration. And then, in bold, undeniable lettering, the name of the payer, Amelia. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The murmurs intensified, turning into whispers, then outright exclamations. Robert's face went ashen, his jaw slack. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The picture of perfect marital bliss shattered, replaced by a raw, uncomfortable silence. More invoices followed, each detailing a specific aspect of the party, the catering, the floral arrangements, the string quartet, the venue rental. Each one bore my name as the payer. The cost of their spectacular anniversary, the one they had so proudly claimed as their own, was being laid bare for everyone to see. The elegant facade they had so carefully constructed was crumbling before their very eyes. I watched their reactions, a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow swirling within me. Their public humiliation was unfolding exactly as I had envisioned, yet the pain in their eyes, however deserved, was still a difficult sight. A voice, clear and amplified, cut through the stunned silence. It was mine. For 30 years, I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. You have built a life on appearances, on the illusion of perfection. You've taken credit for my accomplishments, claimed my successes as your own, and dismissed my worth unless it served your narrative. I saw Robert flinch, his gaze darting around the crowd, no doubt searching for an escape. Eleanor looked as though she might faint, her sapphire gown suddenly appearing too bright, too ostentatious. Tonight, I continued, my voice gaining strength, you celebrate your love, your success, your unwavering dedication to each other. And you should. But let's be honest about who truly paid for this grand display. I gestured to the screen, where the final, cumulative invoice for $18,500 now glowed. This party, this spectacle of your enduring love, was not paid for by your hard work, your generosity, or your impeccable taste. It was paid for by the daughter you consistently overlooked, the daughter whose achievements were merely footnotes in your story. The daughter who finally decided to write her own ending. The crowd was silent, every eye fixed on Robert and Eleanor, whose faces were now a mask of mortification. The climax was approaching, and the air was thick with anticipation. A hush fell over the room, heavy and suffocating. My words, delivered with a precision I hadn't known I possessed, hung in the air like a death knell. Robert, my father, stood frozen, his jaw slack, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. Eleanor, my mother, clutched her husband's arm, her perfectly coiffed hair seeming to wilt under the sudden, harsh spotlight of truth. This wasn't the anniversary celebration they had envisioned, the one where they would bask in the glow of their supposed generosity. This was a reckoning, years in the making. Their friends, the very people whose admiration they so desperately craved, exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some looked away, unable to meet my gaze, while others stared openly, their expressions a mix of shock and morbid curiosity. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect family, the one Robert and Eleanor had so meticulously maintained, was crumbling before their very eyes. I watched it shatter, piece by agonizing piece, and felt a strange cold satisfaction bloom in my chest. This was the justice I had craved, the moment where their carefully curated world imploded. "Amelia, what are you doing?" Robert finally managed to stammer, his voice a strained whisper. It was the voice of a man whose entire reality had just been upended. He looked utterly lost, a puppet whose strings had been abruptly cut. I met his gaze, my own eyes unblinking. "I'm telling the truth, Robert, something you and Eleanor have always been allergic to." My voice was steady, devoid of the tremor I felt deep within. This was my stage, my moment, and I wouldn't falter. "You see, everyone here believes that this extravagant party, this testament to your enduring love, was your grand gesture, a gift from you, to you." But it wasn't. Eleanor's grip on Robert's arm tightened, her knuckles white. "This is ridiculous, Amelia. You're embarrassing us." Her voice, usually so composed, held a desperate edge. The fear of public humiliation, their ultimate nemesis, was finally taking hold. "Embarrassing you?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Oh, believe me, Eleanor, I'm just getting started. The truth, as they say, will set you free. Or, in your case, expose you." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. The silence in the room was so profound, I could almost hear the collective gasp of the guests. "This party," I continued, my voice gaining strength, every single lavish detail, from the imported champagne to the hand-painted invitations, was paid for by me. Every dollar of the $18,500 came directly from my account. I watched their faces, the slow dawning comprehension, the horror turning to outrage. Robert's face flushed crimson, while Eleanor's went ashen. A ripple went through the crowd, whispers erupted, hushed and urgent. $18,500? Someone murmured. The sheer audacity, the scale of my revelation, was clearly sinking in. "But why, Amelia?" Robert finally roared, his composure completely gone. The veneer of the sophisticated patriarch had cracked, revealing the raw, wounded ego beneath. "Why would you do such a thing?" I took a step closer, my eyes locked on his. "Why? Because for 30 years, Robert, you and Eleanor taught me a very specific lesson. You taught me that my value was directly proportional to what I could provide for you, what image I could uphold for you. You taught me that my achievements were merely extensions of your own, my successes only valuable if they reflected well on your legacy." Eleanor tried to interrupt, but I cut her off, my voice sharp. "No, Eleanor, you don't get to speak now. For once, you get to listen." My gaze swept over the stunned faces of their friends, then settled back on my parents. "You celebrated Michael's every minor rebellion, his every misstep, because it was charmingly eccentric. But my accomplishments? My hard work? They were merely expected. They were never enough to earn your genuine pride, your unconditional love, only your constant demands for more." The silence returned, even heavier this time. Robert and Eleanor stood exposed, their carefully constructed world collapsing around them. This wasn't just about the money. It was about years of neglect, Years of feeling like a trophy, not a daughter. The air crackled with the raw emotion of the moment, the culmination of a lifetime of resentment, finally exploding into the open. The resolution was within reach, but the cost, I knew, would be immense. The silence that followed Eleanor's outburst was deafening, a chasm of unspoken truths. My mother, usually so composed, so meticulously put together, stood trembling, her perfect facade shattered. Robert, my father, remained rooted to the spot, his face a mask of disbelief, then a slow dawning horror. This wasn't the anniversary celebration they had envisioned. It was an autopsy of our family. I watched them, a strange mix of vindication and sorrow warring within me. This wasn't about destroying them, not entirely. It was about reclaiming myself, about severing the invisible chains that had bound me for so long. The cost, as I had anticipated, was indeed immense. The comfortable illusion of our family, the one I had so desperately tried to fit into, was gone, irrevocably. Eleanor finally broke the quiet, her voice a raw whisper. "Amelia, how could you after everything we've done for you?" The familiar refrain, the well-worn script of their parental sacrifice, but this time it landed flat, devoid of its usual power. "Everything you've done for me?" I echoed, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Or everything you've done for yourselves, using me as the perfect prop. Do you even remember a single dream I had that wasn't about pleasing you? A single ambition that didn't serve your image?" Robert stirred, his eyes finally meeting mine, and for the first time I saw not anger, but a flicker of something akin to pain. "Amelia, that's not fair. We only wanted the best for you." "The best you could imagine," I retorted, the dam of my stored emotions finally bursting. "The best that reflected well on you." Michael could stumble, he could fail, and it was a charming eccentricity. But me? One misstep, one imperfect grade, and it was a personal failing, a stain on the family name. Do you know what it feels like to live your entire life in a gilded cage, constantly striving for a perfection that isn't even your own? Eleanor started to speak, but I cut her off. "No, let me finish. Because this isn't just about the money for the party, is it? It's about every time you compared me to someone else's perfect child. Every time my accomplishments were met with, 'That's nice, but have you considered?' It's about feeling like a project, not a person." The guests, who had been murmuring amongst themselves, now stood in stunned silence, their eyes darting between us. Michael, who had been attempting to mediate earlier, now stood frozen, his usual bravado gone. Even he seemed to grasp the gravity of the moment. "I paid for this party," I continued, my voice rising slightly, "not out of love, not out of filial duty, but because I needed you to see the true cost of your expectations. I needed you to understand that while you were busy building your perfect life, I was slowly suffocating under the weight of it." Robert took a step towards me, his hand reaching out, then hesitating. "Amelia, please, we can talk about this." "Not here." "Oh, but here is precisely where we need to talk about it, Robert," I said, using his first name, a small rebellion in itself, "because this here is a symbol of everything you value, appearances, grand gestures, the illusion of success. And here is where I finally get to be honest, without fear of disappointing you. Because frankly, I'm done trying." Eleanor, her face blotchy with unshed tears, finally found her voice again. "You've humiliated us, Amelia." "In front of everyone." "Humiliation?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Is that what you call it? I call it truth. You built this stage, you invited this audience. All I did was pull back the curtain. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, years of buried resentment finally unearthed. There was no easy fix, no quick apology that could mend the gaping wounds. This was not a moment of reconciliation, but one of brutal honesty." I looked at them, truly looked at them, and for the first time, I saw not the formidable figures of my childhood, but two people. Flawed and vulnerable, their carefully constructed world crumbling. The satisfaction I felt was not the triumphant roar of victory, but a quiet, hollow ache. The revenge I had sought, the justice I craved, had come at a price far greater than $18,500. It had cost me the last vestiges of my idealized family, leaving behind a stark, undeniable reality. As I turned to leave, the silence followed me, a new kind of silence, one filled not with expectation but with the quiet promise of my own unburdened future. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in my life it was mine to pave. The bittersweet taste of closure lingered on my tongue, a reminder that some victories leave scars, but also the space for something new to grow. The air in the ballroom thickened, a palpable weight pressing down on everyone. My mother's face, usually so composed, was a mask of disbelief, then horror. My father, always the stoic, looked like a man who had just seen his entire world crumble. I watched them, my heart a drumbeat against my ribs, a strange mix of triumph and sorrow swirling within me. The revelation, delivered with such cold precision by Sarah, had landed like a bombshell. My parents, who had always presented themselves as the picture of financial stability and generosity, were exposed as the architects of my lifelong struggle. Their every kind gesture a calculated manipulation. Their eyes, when they finally met mine, held a desperate plea, a frantic scramble to piece together the shattered fragments of their carefully constructed image. But the truth, once unleashed, could not be contained. The murmurs from the guests grew louder, a wave of whispers and gasps that washed over the room. Sarah, my incredible Sarah, stood by my side, a silent pillar of strength, her hand a comforting presence on my arm. She had orchestrated this, not out of malice, but out of a fierce loyalty to me, a desire for the truth to finally see the light of day. She knew the depth of my resentment, the gnawing feeling of betrayal that had festered for decades. My mother, her voice trembling, tried to speak, but no words came out. My father, his face ashen, finally found his voice, a weak, pathetic attempt to deny the undeniable. Robert, this is a misunderstanding. You don't understand the full picture. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that echoed through the stunned silence. Oh, I understand perfectly, Dad. I understand that for years, you watched me struggle, watched me take on extra shifts, sacrifice my own dreams, all while you sat on a secret fortune. I understand that every time I asked for a loan, every time I mentioned my financial woes, you offered platitudes and empty advice, knowing full well you could have alleviated my burdens with a fraction of what you spent on this lavish party. The weight of their deception, the sheer audacity of their betrayal, hit me anew. It wasn't just the money. It was the emotional toll. The years of feeling like a failure, of believing I wasn't good enough, all while they pulled the strings from behind a gilded curtain. My obsession with uncovering the truth, with finding out why they had treated me so differently from my siblings, had consumed me. It had driven a wedge between us that I now realized had always been there, just hidden beneath a veneer of familial affection. The justice I had craved, the moment of reckoning, was here. It wasn't a shouting match or a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet, devastating unraveling. Their faces, stripped bare of their pretense, told the whole story. The shame, the guilt, the desperate need to salvage their reputation. It was all laid out for everyone to see. The guests, once celebrating, now averted their eyes, their discomfort a tangible presence. The party, the grand anniversary, celebration I had funded, dissolved into a chaotic mess. People began to leave, their hurried goodbyes barely audible above the rising tension. My parents were left standing alone, their empire of lies crumbling around them. The aftermath was a strange, bittersweet quiet. The phone calls from my siblings, a mix of anger and confusion, followed in the days that followed. Some understood, some didn't, but the truth was out. My relationship with my parents was irrevocably altered, a chasm now separating us that no apology could bridge. The financial burden of the party, though significant, felt like a small price to pay for the clarity it brought. I had found my peace, a quiet understanding of who they truly were, and in that, a strange sense of liberation. The resentment still lingered, a dull ache, But the obsession had faded, replaced by a quiet resolve to build a life free from their shadows. This closure, though painful, was earned, a testament to the long, arduous journey I had undertaken to finally claim my own truth.